It is important to note that historically speaking, two critical and pivotal moments saved the sovereignty of Central Europe. The first moment, like in 2022, when a Ukrainian soldier received help from the West, because now we know the scale of the assistance that Poland provided to Ukraine and went into conflict with the United States, because Poland gave all its mobilization strength. That's hundreds of tanks, armored personnel carriers, artillery, and everything else. And the planes were packed in a way that they could be taken from the border. Because Poland gave all its mobilization strength. That's hundreds of tanks, armored personnel carriers, artillery, and everything else. And the planes were packed in a way that they could be taken from the border. All of this violated Poland's obligations as a NATO member. And because of that, what they are learning today was a conflict with the administration of the United States. This is the first factor. The second factor, it happened earlier. Putin couldn't handle it because of a strategic mistake. In the year 2014, Russian President Putin made a move when he struck Crimea, when he struck Donetsk and Luhansk. Why? Because first of all, it essentially created the Ukrainian political people who were defined by the question of whose Crimea, and it was immediately clear who thinks in a Ukrainian way and who does not. And if we imagine that there was no Donetsk, no Luhansk, no Crimea, let's imagine 2022, and perhaps Putin along with Lukashenko organized maneuvers, well, not somewhere out there near Sumy and between the area of Grodno and Brest. They're training an army of 300,000. And just imagine that at that time there is simply an uprising of the poor Russians who are indeed persecuted in Riga. At that very moment, Russian military troops enter into Latvia in order to save their fellow compatriots. Poland's choice, aid Baltics or not, Suwalki corridor blocks, no aid, no help. Retreat to the Vistula line as per Polish defense plans. If Poland isn't helping, they don't deserve help. And if Poland isn't helping, then that certainly means it doesn't deserve help. What happens next? Furthermore, Poland also cannot be helped because Germany firstly has no army. As the audit showed, well, there was no army, I agree, von der Leyen as the Minister of Defense. It left behind just an absolutely complete and utterly chaotic mess.
Bundeswehr soldiers told me back in 2018, guys, what are you counting on us for? We have a couple of squadrons of Tiger helicopters, and if they fly, that would be a real blessing.
This is indeed a plan. This is a policy. I think it's a significant question regarding the position of Ms. von der Leyen as the President of the European Union. I strongly believe we absolutely need to very clearly clarify her role in the careful preparation for the upcoming war, just like the role of Ms. Merkel in meticulously preparing this comprehensive plan. I believe that, so why exactly could this have possibly happened? Ukrainians would stay naive, Ukrainians would mock Poles, praise Putin, and boast about the Budapest Memorandum. It would have been unclear, and Ukrainians would laugh at Poles, half praising Putin, and they would have said, great, we have Budapest Memorandum, clever us, geopolitical geniuses. That's how it would have been. Central European countries would have ceased to exist, basically. How good it is that we have the Budapest Memorandum. What great fellows we are. Well, geniuses of geopolitics. Well, that would be it. Americans would have limited their presence if a compromise with Germans led to US withdrawal from Europe. In principle, the Americans would have been forced to limit their presence because if there had been a compromise with the Germans, the result would have been the withdrawal of the United States from Europe. This would have completely changed the situation. The US would have left Europe just like they did in Afghanistan. That would have completely changed the situation. The US would have left Europe just like they did in Afghanistan. Such a scenario could have happened. Putin made a mistake because after the Bolotnaya Square protests, he wanted to boost his ratings. That was his foolishness, and that's what caused Putin to lose. Because in 2022, if the Russians had done that, Ukraine would have threatened Russia. Because Ukraine could have struck from the south against that 300,000 strong group if the United States had provided weapons. The Russians would have been seriously hit. Because Ukraine could have struck from the south against that 300,000 strong group without any problems if, for example, the United States and Britain had provided weapons. The Russians would have faced a serious blow without any issues. So that's how it could have been, more or less. I just think it's absolutely, very definitely worth clarifying indeed, because it changes everything once again. Yura, look, we have one situation, that this is a war over some nonsense about Kiev and Rus, all those writings of Putin in the East, or a global war where a Ukrainian soldier is saving the sovereignty of Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania and Poland. Where the conversation is with Russia and Germany, which has sponsored this war, simply sees the consequences for the entire continent, for the whole world. A Ukrainian soldier is saving the sovereignty and existence of Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania and Poland. Where the conversation is with Russia and Germany, which has undoubtedly sponsored this war, simply sees the consequences for the entire continent, for the whole world, and the ongoing geopolitical tensions, and the significant impact it has on international relations, and the potential long-term effects on global stability. And if the conclusions are drawn correctly, I strongly believe that in essence today what we can demand is: firstly, it is important to note that this particular issue was indeed a significant part of the overall election campaign agenda in Germany. I believe it's a mistake that the Ukrainian side isn't raising this issue about Germany's responsibility for Russia's invasion of Ukraine. And I think that within the framework of the election campaign, the Germans should discuss this, because it's their responsibility. That's the first point, responsibility. First of all. Secondly, I would frame the question this way. Imagine if we were talking about this, well, what would have stopped us if today, let's say, during the current Polish presidency in the EU, we were to politically accept Ukraine into the European Union? I understand that there are issues with trade and some other things. Well, purely politically, there should be a Ukrainian commissioner, there should be Ukrainian MEPs, seats in the European Parliament, so that Ukraine takes its place. Within Europe, the place of the United Kingdom is in the European Union. Restoring democracy in the EU